Sponsored by Pure Bond formaldehyde-free hardwood plywood. Professional grade, domestically made, and with the enduring beauty your work deserves. Available exclusively at the Home Depot and at homedepot.com.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome back to another Crafted Magazine video. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built this desk out of Pure Bond walnut veneered plywood. It goes with the welded steel legs from our last video, so definitely go check out that if you missed that. I'm super proud with this project. So happy with the way it turned out, and hopefully you enjoy the build, so stay tuned. The first step in building the desktop is to cut your top and bottom panels to size. In my case, this was done at the plywood warehouse where I picked it up, but it's a simple process of cutting the panels down from the stock 24-inch by 96-inch pieces to 24-inch by 64-inch pieces. A circular saw or track saw are probably the best choices for this cut, unless you have a really large crosscut sled for your table saw. So the next step is cutting the dividers. These are cut from the offcut from one of the panels. The dividers are 4 inches wide by 24 inches long. These dividers will attach to the top and bottom panels with dado and rabbet joints, and you'll need a total of 5 dividers. After cutting the dividers, it's time to cut the dados and rabbets in which the dividers will be housed. I chose to use a dado stack in my table saw for this, but you could also use a router for this task. Most dado stacks have a setting for the exact width of 3/4 inch plywood, which isn't actually 3/4 of an inch, but instead 23/32 of an inch. You want your dados as snug as possible, as they will provide better holding power the tighter they are. Also, after sanding, the plywood dividers will lose a bit of width, so the joints will loosen up a little. To cut the rabbet on the ends of the panels, you'll need a sacrificial fence. In my case, this is just a piece of scrap plywood. This allows you to have the dado stack completely flush with the fence without damaging your table saw's stock fence. For the rabbet cuts, it's a good idea to make some test cuts to make sure the fit is correct. Once your test cuts look good, cut rabbets on each end of both top and bottom panels. Once the rabbets are cut, it's time to cut the dados. This is where I made my first error on this project. I somehow read the wrong scale on my table saw fence and cut my first dado quite a few inches from where I had originally intended it to be. So it was back to the drawing board. I decided to roughly divide the space on each side of the dado I had accidentally cut and cut dados in the center of those spaces, which would give me a total of 3 dados on each panel. The measurements I used are in the SketchUp file in the build article, which is linked to in the video description. However, these numbers are not perfect, so you might want to adjust your divider positioning on your build. After the dados and rabbets are cut, it's time to apply edge banding. I used a product from FastCap called Fast Edge, and it is really simple to apply. This was my first time ever applying edge banding, and I was very satisfied with the results. Another tip here, if you go with Fast Edge, make sure to pay attention when ordering. I somehow ended up with PVC edge banding rather than real wood. The name of the PVC color I chose is Imperial Walnut, so it's easy to see how I got mixed up, and I decided to just go with it, and I'm actually really happy with the final look. Even though the edge banding is plastic, it has a surprisingly realistic look and should wear extremely well. Since my dados and rabbets were cut prior to edge banding, I also had to cut away the edge banding from those areas, again using a chisel. So to apply this style of edge banding, you cut a piece to rough lengths and then peel and stick it to your edge. Next, you roll the edge banding on the edge of the plywood. This helps to work the adhesive that's built into the edge banding into the plywood. Next, cut the ends flush. After that, cut off the excess from the edges of the edge banding. Once edge banding is applied to all edges of the top and bottom panels and the outward facing edges of the dividers, it's time to prep your surfaces for finish. The walnut veneer was already really smooth from the factory, so I used 180 grit sandpaper to smooth out any imperfections. You want to be careful here, as it is very easy to sand through the veneer, especially with lower grit sandpaper. I decided to go ahead and assemble the bottom portion of the desk before finishing. This served a few purposes. One, it kept me from having to tape off the dados and rabbets on that panel. You really don't want to apply finish to these joints before gluing, as the finish will negatively affect adhesion. Second, I wanted to finish the entire inside of the desk before assembly, as it would be next to impossible to finish the inside areas of the desk once it was assembled. Assembly of the bottom section was a little bit nerve-wracking. It's definitely a good idea to go ahead and figure out your clamping strategy before you start applying glue. The rabbets were particularly awkward to glue up, as they're unsupported on one side. I used a right angle clamp on the rabbeted dividers to hold them in place, and this was very helpful. I applied glue to both the rabbets and to the divider and spread the glue evenly. You want to avoid unnecessary glue squeeze out if possible, because it is very difficult to clean up from the inside corners, and if you don't clean it up, it will affect your finish. I did the same thing for the dados, applying glue to the dado slots and to the divider. I used one large clamp on either end of each dado, and this seemed to work out well. It's nearly impossible to clamp the center of the dados. One option would be to use a bowed caul, which would apply pressure to the center of the dado, but I didn't have any on hand. Also, make sure to check for square along the way and adjust your clamps accordingly. If you angle your clamp slightly, it can actually help pull the divider back into square if it's slightly off. After letting the glue dry, clean up any dried glue and tape off the top of your dividers. Again, you don't want finish getting onto these areas. Once the dividers are taped off, wipe down any surface dust and you're ready for finish. This project was my first time trying an HVLP system, and it certainly will not be my last. I sprayed General Finishes EnduroVar using an Earlex HV5500 HVLP system, and it was very simple. It didn't seem to matter how smooth the finish was coming out of the gun because the EnduroVar leveled out really nicely by the time it dried. I'm not even going to begin to try to tell you the ins and outs of spraying finish with an HVLP system because I'm still a total beginner, but I would definitely recommend checking it out if you're into building fine furniture. It is much easier than it looks, and it makes applying finish a lot quicker than brushing. I sanded with 320 grit sandpaper between coats and applied about 3 coats on each surface of the inside. After finishing all of the inside surfaces of the desk, I assembled the two halves using a similar clamping strategy as before. Once the glue dried, I cleaned everything up and finished the outside of the desktop in the same way, applying about 4 coats of finish. I wanted a little extra protection for the desktop as it will see a lot of use. After the finish had dried completely, I attached the desktop to the welded legs from our previous project video using number 10 3/4 inch long screws, pre-drilling first, and once the legs were attached, the desk was done. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the build. This is probably the most proud of any piece I've built so far. This was a completely original design. It incorporated so many skills that are new to me, and I'm just incredibly happy with the result. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have new videos every Tuesday and Thursday, project videos on Tuesday, and weekly maker roundups on Thursday. Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and comment. That's super helpful. And last, if you want some kind of behind the scenes goodies and another way to support us, check us out on Patreon. It's patreon.com/craftedmagazine. All right guys, thanks again. Hopefully you enjoyed this build, and until next time, happy building.